Welcome back, Dram Fam, to episode 4 on the Whisky Diary. So, smoky whiskey or peated whiskey? What's the difference? Let me explain. So, smoke and peat flavours in whiskey, while they are similar, they are not the same. One usually comes with the other, but these two flavours are responsible for a huge proportion of several whiskies' flavour profiles, and are even responsible really for the characterisation of whiskies of an entire region of Scotland. If you want to know more about the regions of Scotland, I've actually done a video which you can find in the description down below. So, to get a better understanding of how these flavours end up in whiskey, we need to really talk about how whiskey is made. I do have a video coming up on the full distillation process, but for now we'll just stick to malting, which is the most relevant part of the process. Now, there are a number of malting processes such as salad in boxes or like sort of drum batch malting, but today we're going to focus on the traditional method, which is floor malting. Floor malting is the process of taking barley straight from the field, soaking it for anything up to 3 or 4 days, and then spreading it over large floors in buildings known as maltings. When you leave the barley in these warm, damp conditions, it tricks it into believing that it's time to sprout. So it starts germinating. This starts a chemical process inside the barley where enzymes start to convert the starches inside the barley into sugars. There is a lot more science to this process, but I think we'll just keep it simple for now. Those wet grains are turned fairly regularly for a few days. That's just to stop any mould or bacteria growing, to keep everything fresh. Once the germination process has reached a certain point, the green malt, which is the name given to the undried, still germinating barley, is dried. The drying process will stop that germination and prepare the grain for either storage or whiskey making. Now, traditionally, this drying process was done with a kiln, which burns some kind of fuel to produce the hot air, which is then blown through the floors of the maltings, which is what actually dries the barley. Now, this is where the magic happens. Traditionally, peat was the fuel that was used in the kilns in order to dry the barley. Historically, peat was used as it was the most available fuel source in the wet, boggy terrain of Scotland. But due to the desirable flavours it imparts, it's still in use today, although many maltings will produce both peated and unpeated varieties of malt. So, what is peat? Peat is essentially dead plant material which has decomposed over many thousands of years. It forms huge bogs over several parts of Scotland and is dug up and dried and used as a fuel source. When it's dried, it has properties similar to that of coal. So, when that peat is burned, it produces a variety of chemical compounds. Many of those chemical compounds are released in the smoke and absorbed into the barley, and those compounds will make it all the way through to the final bottle. Many of these compounds are in a group known as phenols, and it's these specific compounds which give whiskey that quintessentially peated flavour. Peats from different regions at different levels of dryness will produce different levels of phenols when they're burned, which is why we get such a broad spectrum of smoky and peaty flavours in whiskey. We can actually measure how peaty a whiskey is likely to be by measuring the number of phenols which have actually made it into the dried malt. This is described as the phenolic or phenol parts per million, and on some whiskies you can actually find it written on the bottle, like on this Octomore. So that's where the peat comes from, but what about smoke? Well, aside from the obvious, the burning of the peat, which does produce some smoke elements in and of itself, other smoke flavours can be imparted from the barrel. Whiskey barrels are toasted or charred for various reasons, from structural to actually bend the staves to create the barrel, and flavour. More importantly though, that process is responsible for some of the smokiness imparted in whiskey, as well as many other things like colour and caramel flavours, vanilla. The degree to which the smokiness, or any of those flavours in fact, are detectable is reliant on several factors, from how long the barrel was charred for, the species of the oak that was used, and the spirit that was held in the barrel before it was used for whiskey. Some barrels will even get a fresh dose of fire before they're used. These whiskies are referred to as STR Casks, which literally stands for shaved, toasted and recharred. And that is because that is exactly what happens to the barrel before you put whiskey in it. A great example of this is this Kingsbarns 100% STR, and the colour is absolutely fantastic. It stinks of jam and ripe red wine notes. One of my favourites. Anyway, what is the difference between smoky and peaty whiskey? Many people use these words interchangeably, and whilst some people may argue that this is incorrect, personally I don't really think it matters that much. Having said that, while distinctly different, generally these flavours are found together. Now, a disclaimer. What I'm about to talk about is my taste, and your mileage may vary, you may find different things. That's the beauty of whiskey. Everyone has their own opinion. Now, to me, smoky flavours in whiskey are things like campfire, bonfire, wood smoke, cigars, cigarettes, barbecue or meaty flavours. Whilst peaty flavours could be described as more medicinal, iodine, TCP, plasters, first aid kit, creosote, tar, bitumen. I've even seen the word roadworks used to describe it. Often where you find any one of those flavours, you'll find others. But dependent on the malt and the distilling process, these sort of peaty and smoky flavours can be found in different ratios. Oftentimes it's the interaction between the smoky and peaty flavours can create their own profiles, such as furniture polish and paraffin wax. Even sort of salty and briny flavours can come forward as a result of these two mingling flavour profiles. So let's taste some, shall we? Now, you'll probably have noticed the majority of these whiskies are from Islay. Islay is notorious for its peated whiskies, and arguably the majority of sort of the big heavily peated whiskies come from Islay. But anyway, for now, let's start with what I would consider the most extreme end of the spectrum, which is Laphroaig. I did have a bottle of Laphroaig 10, but I can't find it, so the quarter cask will do for now. Right from the outset, this has got tons of TCP medicinal notes, loads of sort of first aid kit and iodine, loads of sort of creosote as well, like bonfire and roadworks. It's a really, really full-on whiskey. It's so big. It's arguably one of the most famous, sort of easily accessible, heavily peated whiskies. Even after it's done, loads of those iodine notes linger for ages. Even for some big peat lovers, the Laphroaig can be a little bit too much on the peaty side. Anyway, sticking with Islay, we're on to the Kalila 12. This is a great whiskey that's available at a very affordable price. This one for me on the nose definitely starts to head into the smoky territory. It's still got loads of those big iodine and sort of medicinal qualities, but not quite to the degree of the Laphroaig. It's a lot more easygoing as well on the palate, not quite as full on, and again iodine and rich. A thoroughly enjoyable whiskey, and you can usually pick this up for in the region of £30 for a bottle. You'll also find loads of independent bottlers picking this up. I think I've got 2 or 3. Yeah, I've got a Dranmore, and I've got what have we got back here? A Gordon and MacPhail. Yeah, you can find this everywhere. The Kalila has definitely got what I would describe as a more maritime profile, with loads more of those salty seaweed and seaside notes coming through. Still on Islay, we have the Octomore by Bruichladdich. This is by far one of the peatiest whiskies I've got on the shelf. So this is the 11.1, and this clocks in at 139.6 parts per million. Conversely, the Laphroaig is about 45 parts per million, I believe. This one is very different. It doesn't hit you right away with all of those sort of medicinal notes. It's actually quite sweet, quite a lot of vanilla come forward, but you can definitely tell there are tons of peat in here. I mean, this one's bottled at cask strength, 59.4. You can tell it's very oily, very thick. Loads of those tarry sort of bitumen flavours are there, but overall it's a far more balanced dram. As it starts to round off, it picks up more of a smoky bacon, smoky barbecue note, and it definitely lingers with some of those bonfire and campfire wood smoke flavours. Especially when you smell the glass after it's been sat there for a while, you can kind of pick up the bonfire of it when it's just sat on the table. Similar to like if you've had a barbecue or a campfire the night before and you wake up in the morning and you can smell your clothes. It's a fantastic whiskey, one of my personal favourites. Now though, we are over to Speyside with the Benriach Smoky 10. Now, this is a peated whiskey from Speyside. This is made with Highland peat. So it's a lot more gentle. The first thing you get, sweet biscuits, like digestive biscuits, but definitely a wood smoke note in there. In the glass, it definitely comes forward. Sweet barbecue, gentle wood smoke. And there are almost no medicinal notes there. It has a bit of an element of a freshly cut oak, I guess. It's a very, very nice whiskey, but you can definitely tell there's some peat in there, but it's very different from what you would experience over this side. Very much on the palate, very sweet, very delicious, but still that hint of bonfire and a very drying sensation. It's great. This is fairly affordable as well. I think you can sort of pick this up for around £40 a bottle. Really good whiskey. Now, lastly, we have Glenfarclas 105. Now, this is a Speyside, despite it saying Highland on the bottle, because this has caught me out before. Now, this is, to the best of my knowledge, a completely unpeated whiskey. It's a no age statement, but I think the general consensus is it's aged for a minimum of 8 years in ex-sherry and ex-bourbon casks. Now this is cask strength at 60% ABV, and straight away, to my nose, has like a burnt sugar, which it's similar to like hickory smoked ribs, like that kind of sweet barbecue, but it's definitely a burnt sugar smoke to me. This is a really great sort of entry level cask strength whiskey because it's full 60%. It's a very strong whiskey. very rich, and as I say, for an unpeated Speyside whiskey, I definitely detect a hint of smoke. I can't describe it any other way. But it doesn't manifest itself in the same way that it does sort of over this side of the table with your Lafroigs and your Kalilas and whatever else. If you're ever looking to get into a really sort of cheap, affordable, heavily peated whiskey, Master of Malt do their own seaweed, eons, digging and fire. I'm not entirely sure what's in this bottle. I haven't done much research into it, but this is a very heavily peated, somewhat akin, somewhere between your Lafroig and your Kalila. And you can pick it up for next to nothing. So if it's something you want to try and give it a go, I would highly recommend grabbing that. If you're a peat connoisseur, this probably isn't for you. But yeah, for the price, it's not bad. But anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you all very much for watching. If you've liked this video, please do leave a like and comment below with some of your favourite peated or even unpeated whiskies which you can find some smoke in as well. If you'd like to support the channel, please click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to be notified whenever I upload. And on that note, oh Christ, I've got a lot of whiskey here. Let's go with this one. Glenfarclas. Slanjavar.